to watch, in my opinion, are frankly authoritarian-minded presidents who, frankly, a genius at manipulating this. He really is kind of a genius. Democrats say, liberals say he's dumb. He's not dumb at all. He's extremely smart, extremely capable in this game. Try as hard as he can, with the accommodation of most of the GOP, who I think kind of knows this is wrong, but don't know what to do with it. And he has not turned this country into an authoritarian country. And there's things that are happening that are extremely upsetting and very upsetting to conservatives as well. I know lots of Republicans who are not happy with what's happening right now. They just don't know what to do. But he keeps failing at what he wants to do. Greenland failed. He still hasn't built the wall. Minneapolis is blowing up in his face. On everything he turns to in his life and now as a president seems to be failing. And so tribute to our strong democracy, even though it's been, I would say, pretty badly dented in the last few years.
It's for sure that he's not succeeding in the day-to-day things, but I don't know if it actually matters in the great scheme of things, because the general trajectory seems to be getting worse. What they're doing seems to be testing the limits of the system, and the system is holding up to some extent in some places. But when I see the images of those ICE and Border Patrol agents running through the streets of Minneapolis in the way that they were, with the flashbang grenades and then shooting two citizens of the United States who were basically just shooting some video with their phone. They were not doing anything that could possibly damage the lives of these people. And then the immediate sort of narrative that followed, the lying narrative by the entire institution that is the Department of Homeland Security and the presidency, and everyone just saying, well, no, these people were a danger, even though with our own eyes we could see that these people were not a danger. To me, it doesn't really matter whether he's succeeding or not. The fact that he's getting away with shooting Americans on the streets of Minneapolis is enough of an indicator that fascism is here, and that it's no longer authoritarianism coming our way. It's here.
We're on the same page, but I actually don't think it's here yet. I don't even want to say yet, because that means I think it's coming. So what I would say is, Minneapolis, he had to sack and walk back his claims, and the Justice Department is being forced to open an investigation. That's not a win for him. And they got kicked. The Marines got kicked out of Los Angeles, and he suffered defeat in the courts and in the court of public opinion. His popularity is in the toilet right now. The Democrats just won 2 special elections in conservative districts in Texas. It sort of goes on, and all indications are that the midterms are going to be a bloodbath for them. Bloodbaths for the ruling party do not happen in a fascist state. That does not happen. And if this was a fascist state, I don't know, the South Park guys would be dead.
Yeah, but Don Lemon is in jail, arrested. Is that not the same thing? Maybe the South Park guys would be next, but you got people like Don Lemon who you could question what he was doing the other day, but on the other hand, he was just being a reporter. It's not being practiced in this country to arrest and indict people that are just doing reporting.
He'd be dead. He would be not up on charges that a grand jury would have to evaluate. He would be dead.
Are you not concerned that we're just on a very slippery slope? You've got concentration camps being built. You've got, just read today, $10 billion in concentration camps being built by the Navy. You've got people who are citizens of America being pulled out of their homes at night, being thrown into these ICE holding facilities that are, they have no rights. They're not getting legal due process. They're not doing all the stuff you'd expect from Americans. Just isn't not happening in this case.
This has all happened before in this country. We've been through this before. The civil rights movement, check out photographs from Birmingham, Alabama in 1960 that helped give rise to civil rights laws. Go back to 1920-something, there was a coal mine strike in Kentucky, I think it was. The National Guard moved in with machine guns and killed 60-odd miners. We've been through this before. Well, what's amazing right now is the things that you're listing are super upsetting. They're not things that should be even considered in democracy, and it's extraordinary how much of it is being successfully contested in the courts. They had to return, I blanked on his name, that first. They had to return him from Salvador under court order. So those things didn't happen in the 1930s in Germany or what have you. Couldn't go there. I understand the argument that you were making that it might. I just don't think it will. I pray that it won't. And it's certainly not there now.
Well, do you think if you've put yourself in your father's position or in his father's position, maybe we can't see what's coming, but all these fascist states seem to follow the same slow creep, that the tyranny arrives slowly. It's not announced by anything. There's no single event that happens. It's just this slow whittling away of our rights, and then it's too far down the line to turn away or to turn back. And the decision to leave a country, for example, to run away from your country because of what's coming in the government, that must be plaguing a lot of Americans right now as they're thinking about whether they should stay or go. In a similar way that your grandfather must have felt in the same way. The echoes of previous, not so long ago, fascism is not absent. We can see it every day.
But what I would say is that those countries did not have 250 years of democratic tradition behind them. And so the democratic pillars, rules, norms that protected those societies failed quickly, very easily. They're obviously failing much more slowly now. Hitler's rise to power took place in a few years. Donald Trump entered the scene in 2015. He still hasn't even managed to build his wall. I hate what's happening, and I think it's terrifying and super upsetting. But I also see frustration and failure for Trump over and over and over again. And you're right. We don't know the future. No one has ever known what the future held. But I do not think it's a given that we're headed there. We might be, and it's cause for alarm. I also absolutely say we are not a fascist country yet.
No, I think the term that people would use is that we're in a sort of a contested democracy, that we are more like Hungary today than we are like Nazi Germany, but we are like Hungary, which is enough of a scary situation. We're maybe a little bit more liberal or more democratic than Russia. That is no place for America to be.
I would say we're a lot more democratic than Russia. But listen, we've been Hungary many, many times in our history. This isn't our first rodeo as far as Hungary goes. And there was I blanked on his name. I'm blanking on everyone's name. There was a wonderful Czech statesman in the 1930s who died right before World War II, but he watched the rise of fascism in Europe in the 1930s. He's a beloved figure in Czech history. He said this amazing. He said right before World War II started, he said, dictators always good until the last 5 minutes. And the interesting thing about fascism, only Franco survived to die a natural death. It's a very, very unstable form of government. And when it flares up and takes power, it usually doesn't last very long. Sometimes it does, but usually it doesn't. In Spain, my father was there during the war. Playbook that Franco seems to be exactly like what Trump is using, except that it worked a lot better than it has for Trump. And I don't think Trump's going to succeed in what I believe he's trying.
Do you like him? Do you like him as a person? Do you feel like he's likable in any way?
Donald Trump?
Yeah.
I've never met him. All I have to go on is press portrayals of him. I've never met him. I didn't vote for George Bush. I had a lot of problems with his politics, and I met him in person. He's a pretty nice guy.
Yeah, he's a really nice guy.
I have no idea what I would think of Trump. I don't know. I'm for what he represents. Whatever. I don't know. I've never.
Do you haven't voted? I'm not asking who you voted for, but it's not someone you would vote for, obviously. Do you, or maybe, I don't know. Is it someone you'd vote for? Did you vote for him?
Did I vote for Donald Trump?
Yeah.
I would rather cut my wrists, by God. No, I don't vote for a fascist. I want to be fascist. I just think he's going to fail in his little project, but he's definitely, in my opinion, you're a general. Whether you can shoot demonstrators in the legs, you're a fascist. And then when you go on to say that general should be tried for treason,
yeah.
Listen, my father fled fascism. I will die an anti-fascist. And Trump is a wannabe fascist. I think he's going to fail in his project. But he's fulfilled the definition of fascism the list that makes you a fascist is 5 pages long for Donald Trump.
Yeah.
And I don't know, you don't ask a general to shoot protesters in the legs. Did I meant?
You just
Yeah. So Donald Trump asked, there was a protest outside of the White House. Donald Trump didn't like it. He went out there, asked the general, the military could shoot the protesters in the legs. That's something fascists would ask. And then later, I believe it was the same general, he should be tried for treason and hung. That's the kind of thing fascists say. So, of course, I wouldn't vote for Donald Trump. But I do understand his appeal for a very important segment of the population. I do understand their disillusionment with the left. I'm disillusioned with the left as well. I kind of get it. But my God, what a horse to bet on.
I love to hear you talk about that, because it's a lot about your book Tribe is all about this disillusionment of people at war as they return to our home, to America. You've been a war journalist for a very long time. You're probably the most celebrated war journalist of our time. You've been in war zones that are too many to count, actually. And yet, your book on tribalism is really interesting, because you talk about the reason that people feel so disillusioned when they come back to America after war is because we're just not built in a place for connection. We're built as a place of disconnection and individual pursuit. And it's very hard for people that have been cohesive in war to arrive in this disconnected world that we live in. But you can expound better on it than I can. Tell people why you think that there's such a disillusionment amongst, especially war veterans, but amongst a lot of the people in our country.
Look, one of the virtues of combat is that it forces people to think about others. Your survival comes from being part of a group. And the only way to be part of a group in combat is to act selflessly and fearlessly to protect others. And if everyone does that, everyone's safer. And also it puts you in very close proximity with 30, 40 other people in your platoon, which is exactly how humans evolved and survived for 200,000 years. So when you're in combat, you're re-experiencing basically our evolutionary past in a very intense way. And then you come back to America, and the problem, the benefits, but the problem of a affluent, safe society is that people can lead these very individualistic lives where they don't need each other, and so they don't associate very closely with each other. And we know that being disconnected from social engagement from a group is correlated with depression and anxiety and even suicide. So one of the weird things, when there's a catastrophe like the Blitz in London, generally the mental health of the population improves. And then when the catastrophe stops, that's when people have a psychological crisis. Very counterintuitive. If you think about it, it's adaptive in evolutionary terms. It's adaptive to have people function better when they're in danger and closely associated with.
Absolutely, it does. You do get that sort of cohesion when there's an emergency of some sort. It feels like can identify with your friends and neighbors in a more serious way. And yet, America's sort of drifted in the last few decades, especially in red states. We keep hearing about this disillusioned white male that's out there who could, for whatever reasons, not getting laid, not finding purpose in life, not finding political homes in life, drifting quite far from what was the center of American moral fiber, and is now formed the bedrock of this new MAGA movement that is sort of holding up this fascist government, or if you want to call it a wannabe fascist government. Is it the same kind of thing that you're talking about? Do you think that many Americans just feel so disillusioned with government that even belonging to something like MAGA is better than feeling the disillusionment on its own?
For that population, the left looks like they have moral norms. And I mean, it looks exactly the same from the other side.
Right.
I think that the Democratic Party just walked away from the working class, right? They became an elitist party that adopted some very, very specific and narrow, like, social concerns that, like, the trans movement, which is fine. I was like, whatever. I'm for the most amount of rights for everybody. But as an issue of general concern in the population, and particularly working class people who were out of work in the Rust Belt, it just wasn't on the top of the list. And when the left put that on the top of the list, it basically was signaling to those voters, look, we don't really care about your economic concerns. And that happened in my lifetime.
Did they put it on the top of the list, or was it put on the top of the list by the right wing's interpretation of what the left was doing? Because I've never felt that it's been on the top of the list. I felt like it's been present, but not that important. It's the right that sort of has made it into a key thing.
It was a topic that was talked about over and over and over again in left-wing circles. Now, I'm not saying that Biden was like, okay, top of the list, but in left-wing culture, things you heard about over and over and over was that issue. And there's no problem talking about that issue, but there are other things that that voting bloc was concerned with that really we didn't address. I was asked to give a talk to a wonderful group called Indivisible, and they wanted me to talk to them about how to talk to veterans, military veterans, and men, and conservative men in general. So I've spent a lot of time with the military. For them, I'm the MAGA whisperer or something. I can sort of explain to them how that works because I know a lot of because of my work with the military, I'm exposed to that mindset. And so at the end, I sort of talked about you can't talk about toxic masculinity. Those males to vote for you. You just can't do it. It's not going to work. And white male privilege, et cetera. Try telling a coal miner that he's got white privilege. It's just silly. The left refuses to acknowledge socioeconomic strata. It is all sort of gender and racial identity, but really one of the big determinant of a person's outcome, of their determinant of the future of their life, their economic class and how much education they got. And that is the conversation the left refuses to have. I was talking about all this and how you got to figure out how to relate to these voters, men and women both, and who used to be part of the Democratic Party. You lost them and the GOP scooped them up. And at the end, it says, is there any questions? And the first person to raise their hand, any hints on how to talk to those trans issues. I was like, is that all you took from this doc?
Yeah.
You think trans issues are going to win this election? Come on.
No, maybe there's no way trans issues is a winning issue for any political party, not in the current state of America. But if you're going to have to talk to those people, maybe you have to find a way to talk about these issues. I think what you were talking there about how to talk to military people is really interesting. I have a lot of people who've found my work here on Narativ and on Substack who are military, who are absolutely appalled by the lack of civility and the lack of even following the law that this government has. And when they think about what's going on in Venezuela or even being deployed on American streets, it terrifies them because that is the last thing that they want to see their life in service be about, is targeting people on American streets. Do you think that that's going to be an issue that actually at the end of the day makes Trump's attempt, as he's clearly trying to do the Insurrection Act and all these other things that he's attempting to invoke? Do you think that the military would actually follow through with that? With your experience with all these military people, do you think that they would actually follow through these rules, these orders to go to the American streets?
Not the military that I know.
Yeah.
It's inconceivable to me. We had Kent State. What happened in Kent State, as awful as Minneapolis is, Kent State, those were two awful murders. Kent State was a massacre.
Yeah.
We've been worse places before. And the political fallout of Watergate in Kent State was absolutely catastrophic for the Republicans. And so I just don't think the reason Trump is using ICE and the Border Patrol is because he knows perfectly well that the military rules are so drilled into both the line infantry and the officers that when he says when Trump says to someone, "Can't you just shoot them in the legs?" the U.S. military is, I think, from almost to a man and a woman, like, no, sir, actually you can't.
Yeah.
And the utopian vision, the dystopian of the U.S., the 82nd Airborne seizing Chicago and machine gunning people, that's a Hollywood dystopia. That is not something, in my opinion, that could happen in America. It will not happen. And I think one of the reasons he's hesitating to invoke the Insurrection Act is he knows perfectly well it's going to be yet another failure of his ambitions.
That's really true. I think about that dystopian vision. The other dystopian vision that people keep invoking is the sort of the end of of privacy and the surveillance state and the ability for the state to see almost every aspect of your life well before they even encounter you, that they have profiles of each of us, that they instantly can pull up through Palantir or whatever other databases Doge has been able to stitch together, that the idea of being American and free is really being whittled away by the lack of privacy and the surveillance state. How much of a concern is that to you? And especially in the work that you do, it's so complex, isn't it? When you think about everyone knowing so much about you.
Yeah, I don't know what they know about me. I have a flip phone. I don't have a smartphone. So that whole entry point into my.
But why is that? Is that because of privacy? You just didn't want that because of privacy?
I've never had a smartphone. I think they're ghastly. I think they're addictive and awful. I think they're terrible for people. And I don't want to be distracted. I want to be right here in the world.
Yeah.
I'm 64 years old. I don't want to waste any time looking at a damn screen. No, I'm as much of an addict as anybody else. And I know if I had a smartphone in my pocket, I'd be looking at it. So I'm not sorry. It's also why I don't walk around with cigarettes. If I had a pack of cigarettes in my pocket, I'd start smoking. I don't stick around with cigarettes. It's the same thing. It's a deep tech that engineered this stuff were, in my opinion, really, really evil in the algorithms they came up with to addict particularly young people. The rise in depression and anxiety and suicide in young people, absolutely unspeakable since the widespread use.
Yeah.
In 20.
It really has changed us a lot. And when I think about you playing your accordion in Tompkins Park or wherever, this idea of you playing your accordion in Tompkins Park is kind of interesting in that regard. There you are potentially, how does that compare to people who are there watching their screens, reading their iPhone messages, reading their Instagrams? The connection you have with people is so intimate and so direct, obviously, when you're playing your accordion compared to the rest of us wandering around with our heads down.
Yeah, I don't play music much. Most of the time I'm wandering around and I love talking to people. I was talking. I really try to have I try to have a human experience as much as possible. So someone asked me, well, how do you find it? How do you find your way around? I was like, well, I have a glove compartment full of maps.
Real maps, paper maps. Wow.
The sun rises in the east.
That's all you need. That's all you need. I have another question for you that may stir you up a little bit, and I'm not sure if this is the case. When you see the amount of anti-Semitism that is everywhere in our zeitgeist, because you're not on social media, so maybe it's not as evident to you, but I see a lot of it. I see it on social media almost every day that there is this rising tide of anti-Semitism, and I hear it from people, I feel it from people. Partly it's related to the Epstein thing, partly it's related to just Israel's Gaza, what Israel's doing in Gaza, what have you. But it does seem real. Like it does feel like it's here. And with your family's history, what's your sense of how dangerous that is?
When my father got here, there were hotels where if you were Jewish, they wouldn't give you.
Right.
And that kind of thing, I don't think is happening. And my father applied to Harvard, and he had very, very, when he got here as an immigrant at 18, physicist, and a very smart guy. And he interviewed at Harvard, and they said, well, your grades are, we will give you a spot at Harvard, even though we've fulfilled our quota of Jews.
Oh, wow. Oh, God.
And so we went to MIT. He was like, all right, well, thank you very much. And I don't know where this is headed. It's ugly, but I think the anti-Semitism has always been here. It's just sort of under the surface. I mean, they were like neo-Nazis in the 80s and the Michigan militia. There was all these idiots running around in the 80s and the 90s, but they weren't in fashion. And somehow in this era, for whatever reason, it now is sort of just speak in these ways. I don't think that's going to last forever. Again, I think it's all on a cycle. And it does sort of put Donald Trump, I think, and the GOP in a politically complicated position. There are Jewish people in very prominent roles in his administration. And then there's loudmouth, right-wing anti-Semites who have podcasts just talking shit all the time. And then I think the GOP doesn't know how to reconcile those.
Yeah, very difficult to reconcile. Take me back to summer 2020, I think it was, when you you're at home in Cape Cod. It's you, your two daughters, and this abdominal pain. And this is what your latest book is about. But tell us what happened, because it's the most unbelievable story that really sort of brings it all together.
Yeah, I was a war reporter for a long time, and I stopped doing that. I got married. I took two little girls, so I'm in love with. At the time, they were 6 months, and 3 years old at the time in the spring of 2020. And I'm an athlete. I'm a fit, just whatever. I just never thought I would be rushed to the hospital for any medical reason that I didn't somehow cause, chainsaw accident or something. In one moment while I was talking to my wife, I felt this sort of bolt of pain in my abdomen, and I tried to stand up, and I fell over. And I didn't know, I'd had a undiagnosed aneurysm,
Wow.
a weak spotted ballooning in the side of an artery, in my pancreatic artery. And I didn't know. They're asymptomatic and they're deadly. It's very rare and really, it had ruptured at that moment inside me, and I was bleeding out. And just as much as someone had stabbed me with a knife, I was bleeding out into my own abdomen at the rate of a pint of blood every 10 or 15 minutes. You could lose about half your blood before you're dead. And we were living an hour from the hospital. So you can do the math. I was literally a human hourglass. And they got me there alive. And I didn't know I was dying, but something very bad was happening. And they got me there alive. And I'm in sort of end stage hemorrhagic shock minutes from death, apparently. And a big black, and again, I'm an atheist. I just got to reiterate, I am an atheist. My father was an atheist. He was also a physicist, which is atheist squared, atheist in every direction in my family, right? Underneath me, this black pit that I was getting pulled into, and I was terrified of it. And my dead father appeared and said, basically communicated to me, it's okay, you don't have to fight it, you can come with the care. And I said to the doctor, because I'm so conscious, I'm so conversant, right? I said to the doctor, you gotta hurry. I'm going. Like, whatever you're doing, hurry it up, because I'm leaving.
That's the message you got from your father, that you were leaving, that it was okay to leave, that was, he'd be on the other side, or
The other side, he was right there, right? He was like, come.
you could see him, like literally see him in front of you, above you. What do you put that down to? What is that? What is that? Is that your dad, or is that something else that's going on in your body?
See, that's the question, right? So it's a very common experience. A lot of dying people see the dead. The dead seem to come to them to receive them, like my father. And they're called NDEs, near-death experiences. And I did a deep dive into it. And there's a very good case to be for this is all brain chemistry. This sort of like, the last thrashings of the dying brain, right? It's hallucinating things. You're deprived of oxygen, blah, 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 blah. We can reproduce all of this in the lab, as it were. And I sort of bought that argument because I'm a rationalist and I'm an atheist. And it all made sense to me, except for one. The dying seem to all have the same vision. If you give a room full of people LSD, they have vision, but they see wildly different things. They don't all see fire trucks or whatever, right? So the dying see the dead. And sometimes they see dead people that they didn't know had died because the person had died a couple of days earlier, right? I mean, really extraordinary.
That's interesting. Seen people that they didn't know were dead, and then find out that way if they were having a near-death experience themselves. So why can't it be in the scientific world, in a rational world, that we have a subconscious piece of us that continues, a soul, call it what you will, a part of us that continues as energy or what have you in the world? I mean, why do you have to preface this with, okay, this, I'm an atheist, this isn't rational? It can be rational that people experience these things because they're really happening, that they're there.
Well, you have to be very careful to understand what it is you're explaining and that your explanations make rational sense. Scientists are not at all against that theory, right? Schrödinger, one of the originators of quantum theory, quantum mechanics, his opinion was very close to Buddhism, right? His opinion was that individual consciousness, there's a universal consciousness that suffuses the entire universe, the entire cosmos, and that we are briefly differentiated from that by our human identity. And then when we die, we return to this sort of universal consciousness. And one of the reasons I think that he said that was that they discovered around 100 years ago that the subatomic level, and at the quantum level, what subatomic particles do, conscious mind is watching them, is different than what they do. Conscious mind is not watching. In other words, observation of reality creates the reality that you're observing.
Yeah.
And the theory is that consciousness is part of the physical manifestation of the universe, exactly like gravity is, without which there wouldn't be a universe either. And so that's the sort of theory. So these are very rational people proposing a theory that accommodates these strange transition visions that dying people have, accommodates them into a unprovable but rational scientific.
Because there is this, I guess the God, what is it? The God particle was one of those things that they sort of struggle to explain unless you sort of believe in a sort of a connected consciousness or a connected universe that exists beyond our physical world. And I think the Kabbalists are really interesting on this level too. They talk about, your time on earth is really your conscious soul, or call it what you will, here in order to learn or to fix itself, to have some sort of conscious fix. They call it a tikkun, which is a correction. And that's what we're here for, is just to have that correction in our soul. And we might come back again if we fail. But in many ways, I find death a lot easier to deal with when you think about it that way. Otherwise, it's just very, very tragic, knowing that there might be people on the other side that you can reconnect with is so much easier to handle.
Well, of course, there's a great argument to be made for religion that it's a psychic painkiller for people facing death, or for all of us who will face death. I mean, I get that the Schrodinger's theories about consciousness do not at all imply a God, right? My question is completely separate. And you could have a universal consciousness without any God.
Yeah.
Totally different conversations.
When you saw your father, as you last remembered him, or did you remember him, or did he appear as a younger version of himself?
He died at 89. He didn't look like that, but it's very hard. There aren't words in English for what I was looking at. It was his essence. Mm-hmm. He was like he existed as a sort of energy field that was immediately and intimately recognizable to me as my father, but he didn't have a physical manifestation. It wasn't like he was suspended on theatrical wires above me, right? Yeah. Like it was his essence in a kind of energy form. And when he communicated, it wasn't with words. I mean, the doctors didn't hear him or see him, right? He communicated from his mind to my mind. It was very, very strange. And the black pit that was underneath me, no one else in the room saw it, but I felt it. It was there. It was terrifying. I don't know at what level that's real and that's not real. And again, I bought the rationalist explanation, except for this strange phenomenon of the sort of like universality of this vision, the dead. And that I can't quite explain through brain chemistry.
Why do you think you didn't go with him? Why do you think you made the conscious or unconscious choice not to go?
I didn't know I was dying. I just thought I was in for belly pain. And I was so messed up, right? My mind was not working very well, right? I lost half my blood, but I didn't know I was dying. So if you weren't dying, I hope your father's not dead, but whatever.
My mom is, but my dad's still around, thankfully.
Well, a dead loved one comes. Hey, you want a party? Come with me. Well, what are you talking about? You're dead. I'll see you later. Right now, I'm living my life. Got 2 young daughters. I might have had a different reaction to him if I was in great pain and slowly dying of cancer, and knowing I was dying and wanted to be relieved of my earthly coil, right? I was about, oh, thank God you're here. I'm really, but that was not my situation. Yes, a new father, and I was dying, and I love life. Literally, get out of here.
I'm not ready for that. Come back later. Another time, not today, as they say. This idea of a consciousness is what drives a lot of my work, because I feel like, we're all struggling against finding a moral path, a truth, or something in our society, in our world. And it does feel to me like there is a battle between good and evil. It's as simple as that, between light and dark. Call it what you will, that's happening in our world. And it's not between political parties. I think there are people full of light on both sides and people full of dark on both sides. And yet there's something about that greater consciousness thing that I think is what drives us all under these very difficult odds, these scary moments of this presidency and people getting shot in the streets and all these things that feel traumatizing to all of us. There is something connecting us all, and we're all still pulling towards the light, if you will, and the light, a better America and a better view of the world for all humanity. Do you share that now that you've been through that experience, or do you just share it in general, that there is a force that's greater than us, even if it's not God, that is propelling us?
I believe a plan, design, an itinerary for the universe and for our lives, right? I think we have complete free will. I don't think the future can be divined, can be known. Could be, we wouldn't have free will. The outcome was already predetermined. It would just be automatized. So no, I don't think there's a plan. And if your free will goes against what the plan is, you got to follow the plan, well, then you don't have free will. Sorry.
It could be giving us direction, and maybe there's a direction that you can choose. You can choose to be, a dark person. You can choose to be a light person, but ultimately, it feels to me like the better side of humanity, the light is always won. The good is always won. And I'm hoping that that's still the case.
I think they take turns winning. Yeah. I don't think good really won in the early 1940s, until, 45 rolled around. And whatever, it's a tennis. And I think, there are sociopaths walking the earth. And if they can convince people to do their bidding, they're going to cause a lot of damage, right? Mm. That's always been. And there are incredibly brave, honorable people walking the earth as well, who have vowed with their lives to fight that. Very, very inspiring. I don't know. Human morality comes from humans, mm-hmm. right? There is not divinely directed. And to me, there's great hope there. It's terrifying to me that morality might be divinely directed, because then you might listen to a God who's telling you to wipe out people of the other religion. Yeah. You got to get God out of the morality business.
What was it like waking up and seeing your girls again?
Oh my God. Well, I was in the ICU for 5 days, and they, it was during COVID. They couldn't come in. They let my wife in. Yeah. And finally, after a week, I didn't know I'd almost died. And the next day, but the ICU, I woke up in the morning. The ICU nurse said, "Congratulations, you made it. We almost lost you last night. Like, it's a miracle." Wow. I had no idea I'd almost died. And immediately I remembered seeing my dead father. And I just spent immediately I thought about my daughters and how they'd almost lost their father. And I was just speechless with horror. I was embarrassed that I'd almost died. I was ashamed that I'd almost died. And the nurse came, the ICU nurse came back and said, "How you doing?" It was like an hour later. And I said, "Well, what you said is terrifying, and I can't stop thinking about it." And she said this amazing thing. She said, "Instead of thinking about it like something scary, try thinking about it like something sacred." A hell of a thing to say to an atheist, but I've been thinking about it ever since. And my book is an attempt to follow her directions and try to see the moral benefit, the sacredness of the experience that I had. And so when I got home, look, we pulled into the driveway. We lived at the end of a long dirt road in the woods. I got to the end of the driveway, and I was just sobbing. I just held my children and I was just sobbing. I did a lot of crying that year. It was way more traumatic than combat. And I've been traumatized in combat way more traumatic than combat. It took a couple years for me to dig myself out of that one.
Wow. What an incredible story. The book is called In My Time of Dying by Sebastian Junger, and people should really pick it up and read it. How I Came Face to Face with the Idea of an Afterlife. It's a worthy read for anybody. It really connects a lot of dots in a very impressive life. It's a thrill to speak to you, Sebastian. Thank you very much for spending time with me here tonight. And everyone who is not yet subscribed to Sebastian's very, very interesting and incredibly provocative and must-read Substack should be doing that right now. On the top left of the screen, if you're watching on your phone, there's a subscribe button. Make sure you hit that and become a subscriber to Sebastian's work. One of the best war correspondents in the world, and what a story he tells about almost everything in his life, which is one hell of a story, Sebastian. It makes the rest of us feel like we're not really living one.
We're living, trust
We're living. Well, thanks very much. I really appreciate the time. It's great having you here. Thank you.
me. Thank you so much.
Cheers. Have a great night. Sebastian Junger joining us live on Narativ. And that is tonight's show. We'll see you again tomorrow night. Cheers, Seb. Thank you. Bye-bye.